Our next presenter is Barry Fisher. Mr. Fisher earned his bachelor and master's degree in chemistry from the City College of New York and Purdue University, respectively, and has served as the LA County Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory Director from 1986 to 2009. He was the Senior Forensic Science Advisor for the U.S. Department of Justice, International Criminal Investigation Training Program, and currently serves as a consultant for analytical services. Mr. Fisher was accepted into the criminalistic section of the Academy in 1972 and served in various section and Academy positions during his membership, including his tenure as president in 1998 to 1999. In addition to numerous publications, speaking engagements worldwide, and various professional recognitions, Mr. Fisher was honored as a Gradwell Laureate in 2008 and became a Distinguished Fellow in 2001. And I have to say that Barry Fisher was one of the first people that I met when I came to the Academy, and he was an incredibly welcoming and encouraging presence. And so I ask you to please extend to him the same courtesy and welcome him as our next presenter.
Thank you, Betty Lane, and you look nothing like John. When John Gerns emailed me and asked if I would do this, I was humbled, of course, and wondered what I might do to explain things that I had perceived and seen during my years in forensic science, and specifically during my term on the board of directors and as president of this organization. And one quote that Isaac Newton came up with was that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we saw a couple of the giants in the first two presentations, and there are many of us, and it's certainly an apt metaphor for those of us who have served and do serve in various capacities in the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. Each president, of course, brings his own point of view and notions about where the Academy ought to be going, and I'd like to share with you some of those that occurred to me as I was coming up with the chairs. I might also mention and give a shout out that I was sandwiched between two absolutely wonderful leaders in the Academy. Before me was Dr. Michael Peet, and after me, the lovely Patricia McFeely. Hi, Patty. Just wonderful people to be associated with. Just a little bit of background. When I was president, Bill Clinton was president of the United States and was embroiled in the Monica Lewinsky sex scandal and was impeached in 1998. We may see more impeachments yet. One never quite knows. Also, in terms of Academy or forensic science issues, in 1999, the Supreme Court handed down the Kumho tire case, which I think is very, very interesting. You ought to look it up and read it. The court said that they saw no convincing need to draw a distinction between scientific and technical knowledge, and held that the gatekeeping function described in Daubert applied to all expert testimony. And if you're around during the week, I have a talk. I'll give myself a plug at the jurisprudence section, and I'll be talking about the recent PCAST report and how it all relates to these things. So something about my background. At the time I was president of the AAFS, I was also president of the IAFS for 3 years and had to deal with putting on a large meeting. Prior to that, I was president of ASCLAD, the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors, and had spent 40 years working in a law enforcement lab in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Well, you can't help but bringing all those areas of experience and expertise together when you find yourself in a leadership position. So what did I learn from that experience? First of all, forensic science is really complex, and I can see my colleagues out there, you certainly should agree with me on that point. When you're coming up, this is for some of the newer people, you'll be faced first, you'll be starting off generally as a scientist, and at some point you're going to have to make a decision if you want to continue on that track or go into laboratory administration or management. In my case, I chose to get into management. Worked for me. Some people love it, some people don't. And I also learned that we in forensic scientists, even though there are quite a few people here, are truly small fish in a very, very large pond, which makes up the criminal justice, medical legal systems. We're almost an afterthought about what goes on. And it occurred to me during these times, particularly as I was president, that we needed to do something about collaborating through advocacy. In other words, if we were trying to get anything done, unless we had some support from other organizations, from users, from stakeholders of our fields, nothing was going to happen. And the one thing that we did get started back in during my time was a group called the Consortium of Forensic Science Organizations, and I'm going to bring that group up a number of times because I think it was very important then, and probably even more important today in keeping track of the direction we're going. The reason that this thing got started was I had met some people back in Washington on some of my expeditions back there to advocate for forensic science, and I became familiar with a fellow by the name of Dr. Neil Lane. Dr. Lane happened to be the chair or president of the President's Council of Scientific Science and Technology, a cabinet-level position under the Clinton administration. And he was kind enough to meet with a bunch of forensic people from ASCLD, the American Academy, the IAI, NAME, at a meeting we had together actually before we had formed the consortium. And he got up in front of us and he said, I know that many of you are coming to Washington to lobby on your respective organizations' behalf. It just is noise for the people that you're talking to. You need to have a coherent message. And he said, in order to be successful, you need to form a consortium. He actually chose that term, and we took it and ran. And we began to get out there and do some remarkable things. We worked with Department of Justice, NIJ, sometimes in contentious ways, other times in cooperative ways, but we did help move the ball a little. We also reached out to some crime victims groups. I think victims are a very important source of political pressure for our organizations and can help us out. The IACP played a small but I suppose somewhat influential role in our efforts because they were the things that we did in forensic science was important to their particular mission. A big player for us was the National District Attorneys Association. We were kindred spirits in some ways, and they took our issues and helped us push them along. The Innocence Project, again, we didn't always agree with everything that they had to say, but we worked in a cooperative fashion in some areas. And lastly, just a little footnote, I don't know if any of you know this person, Jan Burke. She's a mystery writer. She just loved forensic science, and you can Google her. She stood up a web page called the Crime Lab Project, and for many, many years kind of ran a blog about stuff that was going on in the lobbying field and what was happening in Congress and whatnot. This is an early picture. I see some of you out there in the audience of some of our efforts. There's a couple of past presidents there, some stellar members of NAME and the Academy and the IAI, and the little blonde-haired girl standing off to the right side is Beth Lavish, who was our lobbyist consultant, and I have to commend Beth for opening up more doors than you can possibly imagine to get things going. I happened to have drinks with her last evening, and she was telling me that the people that we had met early on in this effort were now really important individuals in the administration and in Congress. We don't have to go there anymore and tell them what forensic is all about. They get it. Turns out, like him or not, the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, was a very early supporter of forensic science and helped us get some key legislation passed that have funded a number of organizations that are represented by people in this room. So we would get to Washington on many, many occasions. I would be flying out there 4 and 5 times a year from Los Angeles, and it was a wonderful experience, and I think it's something that has helped us to get to where we're going. One of the results of our efforts, again, whether you like it or not, we were pushing to have some sort of federal level report about the status of forensic science, and because of our lobbying efforts in Congress, the National Academy of Sciences, National Research Council stood up a committee to take a look at what was going on. Now, some people were not very happy with some of the words in there, and other people thought it was a good thing. For me, it's a question of any kind of publicity is good publicity. It raises the issue and helps keep us focused on the importance. Other offsprings of these efforts that kind of got started because of our efforts was the National Forensic Science Commission, which is due to sunset later this year. Its future is unclear, it's uncertain where it's going to go, but I personally think that some sort of national body in Washington, whether it's housed in the Department of Justice or some other location, is really important to all of us as professionals. The Organization of Scientific Area Committees, or OSAC, is a spin-off of that also, and that's an important thing. And lastly, this recent report, albeit from my perspective somewhat troubling, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, or PCAST, raised some interesting issues on forensic science in the criminal courts. I suspect many here will disagree with those findings, but again, it raises the focus and makes people take notice that there are issues out there that at least need to be considered. Some final thoughts. I think as advocates, the Academy can facilitate change in our profession. Some might think this is a good thing, others might not. The Academy is an important player in these advocacy efforts, but they have to be done to be successful in conjunction with other professional organizations, as we've done through the Academy. Serving as your representative during my term in office was a great privilege for which I am grateful. And lastly, I want to wish all of our future leaders in the Academy every success during their respective terms of office. Thank you.